A photon strikes the epidermis. Thermal receptors fire. The mammalian nervous system registers a microfluctuation in ambient energy. The biological machine demands equilibrium. You activate a mechanical compressor. You purchase manufactured cold. You purchase an illusion. For 200,000 years, the hominid structure adapted to the diurnal thermal swing. The planetary mass absorbs radiation. The atmosphere expands. The biological core temperature rises. Sweat glands excrete saline. Evaporative cooling initiates. The planet rotates. The atmosphere contracts. The Earth acts as an infinite thermal heat sink. The biological core resets. The circadian thermal rhythm was unbroken. Then came the 20th century. We sealed the architecture. We isolated the biome. We substituted thermal mass for mechanical brute force. Decades of artificial climate isolation. The circadian thermal rhythm is shattered. 7 summers of synthetic refrigeration. 7 summers of pressurized freon. 7 summers of static, unyielding indoor temperatures. The physiological resilience degrades. The cellular mitochondria forget how to thermoregulate. We treat the human body like a fragile artifact. We treat the environment like an enemy. It is a fundamental violation of evolutionary physics. Thermodynamic equilibrium does not require moving parts. It requires mass. It requires specific heat capacity. The solution sits on commercial shelves. Ignored. Misunderstood. Sold for chemical balance in artificial bodies of water. Sold for negligible currency. Sodium sulfate decahydrate. An inorganic salt. A molecular architecture designed for thermal capture. Packed into a hermetically sealed barrier in your overhead architecture, it will swallow a room's thermal load. It will release it into the nocturnal void. Every single planetary rotation. Zero electrical current. Zero mechanical failure. Maria Telkes, at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, isolated this mechanism in 1948. She constructed a dwelling entirely reliant on phase change mechanics. The Dover Sun House. The architecture functioned, then the industrial complex intervened. The mechanical air conditioner was mass-produced. Chemical elegance was replaced by electrical dependency. The salt was forgotten. The blueprint was buried in the mid-century archives. Today, the components require $40. No regulatory permits. No specialized technicians. No electrical grid. The physics are absolute. The biological organism perceives temperature through sensible heat. To elevate 1 pound of liquid water by 1 degree Fahrenheit requires exactly 1 British thermal unit of energy. The temperature rises. The thermal kinetic energy increases. The thermometer registers the shift. That is the baseline. Now observe the crystalline matrix of sodium sulfate decahydrate. The atmospheric temperature reaches 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The thermal load penetrates the crystal. The energy transfers. But the temperature of the salt remains entirely static. The thermal energy does not accelerate the molecules. The energy severs the crystalline lattice. Solid transition to liquid. The energy is consumed by the structural phase change. Physicists define this as latent heat. The absorption capacity is massive. When 1 pound of this specific salt transitions from solid to liquid, it swallows more than 100 British thermal units, the equivalent of boiling water, but occurring at a precise, biologically useful point on the thermometer. The room heats. The environment pushes toward physiological discomfort. The salt reaches its threshold. The lattice collapses. The heat is stripped from the breathable atmosphere at the exact millisecond the biological organism requires relief. The thermostat is not wired into a circuit board. The thermostat is hard-coded into the molecular bonds of the chemistry. Thermal capacity is useless without a discharge sequence. The battery requires a reset. The Earth rotates. The ambient atmospheric energy drops below 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The thermodynamic gradient reverse. The liquid salt seeks its baseline state. The molecular bonds reform. Liquid reverts to solid crystal. The stored daytime thermal energy is expelled into the nocturnal void. By sunrise, the crystalline matrix is completely restored, fully discharged of heat. Fully charged with cold, it charges with the absence of heat. It discharges thermal absorption. It repeats this biological cycle eternally. No compressor, no evaporator coils, no fragile copper lines. There is one flaw, a singular chemical reality that destroyed the Dover Sun House in 1948. We will engineer around it. But the physics demand precise execution. Define the architectural mechanism. A hermetically sealed phase change panel, sodium sulfate decahydrate, two chemical stabilizers, encapsulated in planar geometry, elevated to the atmospheric apex of the dwelling, paired with a nocturnal thermal exhaust protocol. There is no graphical user interface. There is no electrical tether. There is no scheduled maintenance. There is only thermodynamic inevitability. The performance parameters are rigid. In optimized climates, this chemical mass arrests the diurnal thermal spike. It flatlines the temperature curve. The internal atmosphere climbs toward human discomfort, but stalls. It anchors at 85 degrees Fahrenheit. The salt dictates the thermal ceiling. It holds that line while the planetary radiation peaks. Ignore the algorithmic deception. Ignore the digital fabrications of 40-degree internal environments without mechanical compressors. It is a biological buffer, a thermal flywheel for the mammalian habitat. 1 square meter of this crystalline matrix buffers the equivalent thermal radiation of a multi-tiered masonry wall. It operates at a fraction of the gravitational load. The physics require 40 standard units of currency. The material procurement is elemental. Do not overcomplicate the logistics. Sodium sulfate decahydrate, Glauber's salt. Do not purchase laboratory-grade purity at a premium. Procure industrial agricultural surplus. The biological pool supply network or the soil amendment sector, £20 for a single atmospheric zone, $25. The second component dictates longevity. A cross-linked polyacrylate polymer, sodium polyacrylate, a synthetic macromolecule designed for absolute aqueous absorption. The biological waste and infant diaper industry utilizes it. It suspends the crystal, 3 to 4% by mass, a negligible cost. The third component is sodium tetraborate, Borax, the commercial laundry aisle, 3 to 4% by mass. Without it, the thermodynamic cycle collapses entirely. The containment vessels must be planar, thin, high surface-to-volume ratio, high-density polyethylene food storage or heat-sealed polymer pouches. A digital thermometer is required to verify the physics. No other technology is permitted. $40. Understand the failure vectors. Every component is engineered to counteract a specific molecular collapse. Thermal transfer is a mathematical function of surface area. Heat penetrates the boundary wall. A deep, cylindrical volume of salt is thermodynamically blind. The thermal energy impacts the perimeter. The core remains solid. The mass is wasted. Planar geometry maximizes atmospheric contact. Thin architecture is mandatory. The charge and discharge cycles must synchronize with the rotation of the Earth. Now, the molecular failure. Sodium sulfate melts incongruently. The crystalline lattice does not transition into a homogeneous liquid state. It fractures. The heavy molecules precipitate. They plummet to the gravitational floor of the vessel. They refuse to reintegrate upon cooling. Cycle after cycle, the salt stratifies. The panel becomes dead sediment. This is the exact chemical betrayal that doomed Maria Telkes in 1948. Her thermal bins in the Dover Sun House collapsed after 2.5 seasons. The polyacrylate polymer neutralizes this. It cross-links the liquid into a highly viscous gel. It locks the salt crystals in spatial suspension. Gravity is defeated. That singular chemical addition separates her historical failure from your functional mechanism. The opposite failure is supercooling. Pure Glauber's salt rejects crystallization. The nocturnal temperature plummets. The liquid stubbornness persists. The chemistry drops well below 90 degrees Fahrenheit and remains entirely fluid. No crystallization. No thermal discharge. A liquid panel at sunrise is a dead panel. It cannot absorb tomorrow's thermal load. Sodium tetraborate acts as a nucleating agent. It provides a molecular seed, a structural template for the lattice to rebuild. Night after night, the temperature drops. The borax triggers the phase change. The battery resets. The installation follows the thermodynamics of atmospheric density. Thermal energy rises. Position the matrix at the highest architectural point. The synthesis is primitive. Precision is demanded in the mass ratios, not the manual labor. Apply synthetic nitrile barriers to the epidermis. Allocate 1 hour. Weigh the sodium sulfate. Verify the hydration state. The decahydrate implies 10 water molecules are already bound within the molecular structure. Addition of external H2O is minimal. If you procured the anhydrous variant, you must synthetically reconstruct the hydrate ratio. 44 parts, water to 56 parts, salt by mass. Measure the sodium tetraborate. Measure the polyacrylate, 3 to 4% of total mass each. Set them aside. Apply external thermal energy. Elevate the salt past 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Utilize a 110-degree aqueous bath. The solid transitions into a hydrated slush. Introduce the sodium tetraborate first. Ensure absolute dissolution. Introduce the polyacrylate sequentially. Maintain kinetic agitation. The viscosity will shift instantaneously. The aqueous slush will calcify into a gelatinous concrete under the friction of the implement. The stratification vulnerability is patched in real time. Transfer the matrix into the planar vessels. Observe the singular catastrophic error. The crystalline lattice expands during state change. It mirrors Hackett-O. Fill the vessels to exactly 85% capacity. Atmospheric void space is mandatory. A fully packed vessel will rupture the structural seals under the pressure of its own nocturnal crystallization. Seal the boundaries hermetically. Escaping moisture alters the hydrate ratio. The battery slowly desiccates. Label a singular unit. Inspect it seasonally for stratification. Leave the matrix to stabilize. Installation requires 2 strict parameters: intercepting the thermal load and evacuating the thermal load. Elevate the panels. Drop ceilings. Attic floorboards. The apex of southern-facing fenestration. 1 square meter of phase change material for every 15 square meters of biological footprint. Scale the mass according to the severity of the planetary radiation. Now, the absolute law of survival. The biological machine dies without sleep. The thermal machine dies without a flush. The stored radiation must be evacuated. The architectural envelope must be breached at night. Activate cross-ventilation. Exhaust the interior air. If the salt does not register temperatures below 90 degrees, the lattice will not rebuild. The battery will not recharge. You possess 1 day of thermal buffer. Then, a ceiling of useless, lukewarm fluid. The chemistry is inert, non-toxic, non-flammable, biologically harmless. Contrast this with pressurized refrigerants. Pressurized tetrafluoroethane leaks. It demands specialized technicians. Your chemical mass simply exists. The operational limits are dictated by geography. The Fraunhofer Institute in Germany quantified this. Phase change materials shear peak indoor temperatures by absolute, measurable degrees. But they demand a specific atmospheric oscillation. The nocturnal baseline must plummet. The dry continental interior, the high plains, the mountain west. If the geography dictates humid, stagnant, nocturnal heat, the Gulf Coast, the deep tropics, the system is mathematically incompatible. The nocturnal reset never occurs. The thermodynamic gradient does not exist. The thermal flywheel requires friction. You have bypassed the industrial cooling apparatus. The chemical architecture Maria Telkes initiated is complete. You patch the incongruent melting flaw with a synthetic polymer she lacked. The salt ignores the market. It ignores planned obsolescence. It undergoes phase change at 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It did so in 1948. It will do so when the mechanical compressors rust into the earth. No technicians. No hydrofluorocarbons. Just orbital mechanics and chemical potential. The knowledge was merely omitted from the commercial narrative. There is no recurring revenue in a mechanism that functions for 5 decades without failure. Lie on a hard floor. 5 minutes. Feel the concrete against the hominid spine. The planet seeks thermal equilibrium. Your architecture is merely standing in the way.